ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। So, in the beginning itself, what is the meaning of the word Upanishad? The etymology of the word Upanishad can be discussed. Upanishad means, this explanation is given by Shankara in the Kathopanishad. Sater dhatoho visharana datyavasadanarthasya upanipurvasya kvit pratyayantasya rupam Upanishad iti. Sad dhatu, which means, Panini has given it three meanings: Visharana, Gati and Avasadana. Visharana means destruction. Destruction of ignorance. Gati means leading. Leading one, the individual soul or the sadhaka or the who approaches the reader of the Upanishads to Brahman. And Avasadana, it loosens the bandhana of samsara. So it is called, so these three meanings are given: Visharana, Gati, Avasadana. To whom it happens. Here we come to the meaning of the prefix Upa and Ni. Upa means Samipe, and it indicates approaching the Guru with devotion, who sits at the feet of the Guru. And then he assimilates the teachings of the Guru. And Ni means two things are the two words, Nishchaya and Nishtha. With determination and Nishtha, with perseverance. He takes up the teachings of the Guru. And then the last is Kvit Pratyaya. Kvit is something employed by grammarians to transform verbal roots to nouns, noun forms. Like Sard is the verbal root form. So the Kvit Pratyaya is added to it. It disappears, the whole thing disappears. But in effect, that verbal root is transformed into a noun-like thing. So that is how the word Upanishad is derived. The grammatical analysis of the word Upanishad. We should have a general idea of what the Vedas are. So let us go. What does Vedas mean? Mainly I have taken this topic, I have referred to Swami Nikhilanandaji's one Upanishad, one introduction is that. In a brief manner, he has described all the aspects. Now, according to him, Vedas is supersensuous wisdom. The wisdom, that the knowledge that we do not get through the sense organs, that is physical sciences, the data we get from sense organs, and we reason on that data and we reach certain conclusions, which is the science, physical sciences. But in Vedas, it is supersensuous wisdom. The wisdom that is gained through the processes of yoga, through the spiritual and mental disciplines of yoga. Now, with reference to this, what is Vedas? Now, Patanjali's view is that the words of the Vedas are not eternal. It is the ideas that are conveyed by the Vedas, called Spota, that is eternal. And in every, for instance, the previous cycles of the Kalpas, The words may change, but the ideas remain the same. Now, Swamiji has also spoken about this spota. So we will go through that a little bit. I will quote some of Swamiji's quotations regarding this spota. He has referred to it in two different places. One is the talks with Swamiji, the talks he has with his disciple Sharat Chandra Chakravarti, and the second one is in the Bhakti Yoga. So some little bit, it is very much relevant because Swamiji goes into it in a very deep manner. Veda is of the nature of Shabda or of idea. It is but the sum total of ideas. Shabda. Shabda, according to the old Vedic meaning of the term, is the subtle idea which reveals itself by taking the gross form later on. So, owing to the dissolution of the creation, the subtle seeds of the future creation become involved in the Veda. So, this is the first thing. Veda is of the nature of Shabda or of idea. That is when the whole creation is dissolved or in the final stages of creation. All the objects that we see are dissolved into its subtlest form, which Swamiji calls Shabda. And this Shabda, according to Swamiji, and Swamiji himself is quoting, is interpreting Sayanacharya, one Acharya who has explained the Vedas, who has commented on the Vedas. And this Shabda, the Shabda state is what is called the Vedas. So we can think of it in this way. There is Nama-Rupa. The whole creation is Nama-Rupa. And this Nama-Rupa becomes reduced to Shabda, its subtlest form of existence. And this Shabda is Vedas. In Shabda or idea, all gross objects are their subtle forms. Creation had proceeded in the same way in all previous cycles or kalpas. This you find in the Sandhya mantra of the Vedas. Surya Chandramasau Dhata Yatha Purvam Akalpayat Prithvi Divam Cha Antariksham Adho Swaha. The Creator projected the sun, the moon, the earth, the atmosphere, the heaven, and the upper spheres in the same manner and process as in previous cycles. Next is, even when the whole creation is annihilated, the Shabda as the consciousness of the universe or the subtle reality of all concrete things exists in Brahman as the cause. At the point of creative manifestation, this sum total of causal entities vibrates into activity as it were, and as being the sonant material substance of it all, the eternal primal sound of Om continues to come out of itself. And then from the causal totality comes out first the subtle image or Shabda form of each particular thing, and then its gross manifestation. Now that causal Shabda or word consciousness is Brahman and it is the Veda. This is the purport of Sayana. This is the purport of Sayana. And he elaborates that. So if the universe be destroyed, I mean if all things making up the universe be smashed to atoms, why should not the ideas or Shabdas representing all of them in consciousness be still existing? And why cannot a second creation be supposed to come out of them in time? A jug must be revealed if the idea of it rises in Brahman, which is perfect in its creative determinations. When we see even those established in the practice of religion, sadhakas, bring about by willpower things otherwise impossible to happen, what to speak of Brahman with perfect creativeness of will? At the point of creation, Brahman becomes manifest as Shabda and then assumes the form of Nada or Om. At the next stage, the particular Shabdas or ideas that variously existed in former cycles, such as Bhuhu, Bhuvaha, Suvaha, cow, man, etc., begin to come out of the Om. As soon as these ideas appear in Brahman, endowed with perfect will, the corresponding concrete things also appear, and gradually the diversified universe becomes manifest. Do you now understand how Shabda is the source of creation? So, this is what Swamiji is telling. In essence, the whole creation can be generalized into Nama Rupa. All concrete things which are forms of experience are Rupa. And they all, we can give them a name. In any being having the power of speech, in man who has the power of speech, we use words to denote things. Then this Nama Rupa becomes reduced at the end of creation to its subtlest state of existence, which is Shabda. And this Shabda is the Veda. And again at the start of creation, this Shabda manifests as the material of this Shabda is Omkara. This Omkara is used to represent this Shabda, is the representative of this Shabda. And Omkara starts manifesting, and out of the diversified Shabdas appear, of all objects in this universe appear. And then out of these different causal Shabdas, the concrete forms also appear. So this is how this Vedas is equated with Shabda, and that way out of which comes all names and forms. Now, the next thing is, what is told is that Brahma, this is told in the Puranas. This is described in the Pauranika language, the language of our mythology, that in the beginning of creation, Brahma was meditating on the Supreme Lord. Suddenly, he begins to hear, and through the grace of the Lord, he begins to hear an indistinct sound coming inside his own heart, emanating from his own heart. This Shabda develops into what is called the Nada Brahman or Omkara. And out of this Omkara, all consonants and vyanjanas appear of the Sanskrit language. They come out. And using these consonants, this Shabda, Swaras and Vyanjanas, Brahma utters the words of the Vedas, which is and this Omkara is the essence of Vedic wisdom. And this is the process described in the Puranas. So now we have discussed what is that by Veda is meant the Shabda, and the theory how with the help of the Vedas the Creator created this universe. Now we will take up the next point, which is what are Shrutis. Another name for the Vedas is Shrutis. Shrutis means those which are orally transmitted. The written word came much later. So, what happened was, first, Brahma, the creator of the universe, he transmitted this to creation, to the Rishis, and that genealogy is given. The Rishis transmitted it to their disciples, and This oral transmission was the means of propagating the Vedas. The written word came much later on. And because of this only, it is believed that the pronunciation of the Vedas, it retains the same character as it was communicated at the beginning of creation by Brahma to the Rishis. So this is another aspect of the Vedas, that it is orally transmitted and therefore it is called Shrutis. And another thing that is implied by this oral transmission is that it has got no human authorship. The next thing is the division of Vedas. The Vedas can be divided, this is another division of the Vedas into what is called the Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda. By Karma Kanda is meant the sacrifices and ceremonies. And this is, for that you require that three things are generally the mantras, brahmanas and aranyakas. These are the three things which is connected with what is called the Karma Kanda. The next thing is what is called and then the second thing is Jnana Kanda. The purpose of Karma Kanda is attainment of prosperity here in this world and happiness in Swarga hereafter. And what is the purpose of Jnana Kanda? Jnana Kanda means moksha, liberation, through the destruction of ignorance. So these are the two, another kind of division of the Vedas. Sacrifices and ceremonials which is performed to attain prosperity here in this world. Like cattle, prosperity is, in ancient India, is identified with three things. Cattle, then dairy, milk products, land and harvesting. These are the three things with which this is identified. Prosperity is identified. Land, cattle and harvesting. Next is, how has now these Vedas, Vyasa compiled these Vedas. The Vedas were existing since time immemorial, but at a later date, like it is believed according to historians or the experts, the date varies. Some consider the date of Vyasa to be around say 1200 BC, others say 2400 BC. Still Balagangadhar Tilak places it even backwards, around 5000 BC. Anyway, this Vyasa composed the Mahabharata and he was commanded by Brahma to compile the Vedas. So what he did was, the Rigs, there are something called the Rig Mantras. In the Rig Mantras, mantras are arranged according to the deities of the sacrifice. Like for instance, mantras that are to be uttered in praise of Agni is kept in one place. These are the Rig Mantras. And again that those that are in praise of Vayu is kept in another place. According to the deity, the mantras are arranged. Now these mantras are arranged in the Vedas. The Rig mantras are compiled in the Rig Veda. The same Rig mantras set to a melodious tune, They are arranged according to their usage in what is called the Somayaga. That is called the Samaveda. The same rites, when they are arranged according to their general usage in sacrifices, that becomes the Yajurveda when they are arranged. And finally is something called the Chandas. These Chandas it doesn't have much relevance to sacrifices. Mainly the duties of the kings, incantations, such things are collected and compiled into what is called the Atharva Veda. So the rites he compiled into the Rig Veda, the Yajus into the Yajurveda, the Samans into the Samaveda, and the Chandas into the Atharva Veda. The Western view excludes Atharva Veda, but the Indian traditional view is that this is very much included in the Vedas. Though we have the concept of Trayi. Trayi means the three Vedas, which are Rig, Yajus, and Sama. Atharva Veda is excluded, not excluded actually, but because it is not used in sacrifices. The Trayi does not include Atharva Veda, but one of the priests officiating in these sacrifices is to be versed in the Atharva Veda. Now we come to the arrangement of Vedas. Now how are the Vedas arranged? First is the Samhita portion, which are called the mantras. The mantras are arranged. And again, as I told before, the mantras will be always in praise of certain deities. Next is the Brahmana portions, which is the instructions for sacrifices. And that is mainly, these mantras are utilized in this Brahmana portion. And a sacrifice is nothing but the offering of oblations to a deity. A fire is lit, holy fire is lit, and oblations are offered to a particular deity, and this is what is called sacrifice. So this is the second portion. The next is what is called the Aranyaka portion, for forest treatises. Here, sacrifices are not involved. This deals mainly with symbolic worship and meditations. Symbolic worship means there is no more that physical activity of worship, but the worship is mainly mental, and meditations are there. And the next is the Upanishads. So, this is how the Vedas have been arranged. First comes the Samhita portion, then the Brahmana portion, then the Aranyaka portion, and then the Upanishads. Again, the Upanishads mostly follow after the Aranyaka portion, the forest treatises. But this is not always the case. In a few cases, it comes at the end of the Samhita portion, or at the end of the Brahmana portion, or at the end of and then mostly it comes at the end of the Aranyaka portion. Now we come to the four stages. Now, why is it arranged like this? This is another question, and this is connected with why one of the terms for Vedanta is that which comes at the end of the text of the Vedas. Now there are four stages of life. The first is the Brahmacharya state. What is the Brahmachari? Who is the Brahmachari? The Brahmachari is three things are there. One is he has taken the vow of chastity and celibacy. Second thing is, he leads an austere life and he serves the teacher with humility. So he goes to the Guru and under his guidance, he learns the Vedas, the mantra portion of the Vedas. Next, he takes the Guru's blessings, leaves the presence of the Guru with the vow that he will stick to truth, never deviate from the study of the Vedas, and with the Guru's blessings, he leaves the place. The next stage is when he takes up the householder's life. He takes a wife, and then whatever the mantras he has studied in the Samhita portion, using those mantras, he performs sacrifices. And then, when his hair turns grey, when wrinkles appear and his hair turns grey, he, along with his wife, gives up his hearth and home and goes to the forest. And this is the stage of the Vanaprastha. Here what he does is, he does not have material to perform sacrifices. So what he does is, he does a symbolic worship. He imagines all those things. Or he finds higher symbolism, higher ideas associated with the physical acts. He meditates on them. And this is the what is called the he spends his time on this. This is called the forest treatises, Aranyaka portion. The example is what is given in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There is one meditation in the very beginning. Ushava Ashwasya Medhyasya Shiraha. It goes like that. Actually, it is a meditation on the Ashwamedha sacrifice. But what the sadhaka does is, what the person does is, he is asked to meditate on the dawn as the head of the sacrificial horse, on the sun as the eye of the sacrificial horse, on life as the air of the sacrificial, on air as the life of the sacrificial horse. So this is what is done in this Aranyaka stage, and this is called Upasanas, meditations. And the next stage is the Upanishads. And what happens in the stage of the Upanishads? This person has given up, he takes up the vow of a wandering monk. He gives up his hut and home, and he gives up all desires. He gives up all attachments. He is supposed to be continuously absorbed in the contemplation of Brahman. He is supposed to have transcended the need of both material and mental worship. He should be completely committed to the propagation of truth and the service of humanity. The society, in turn, gives him the position of a leader of society, respects him as a leader or as a teacher. And the Upanishad portion, the sannyasi is to be guided by the Upanishad portions. So now we come to the meaning of Vedanta. The brahmachari specializes, though he may read everything, he specializes in the Samhita portion. Then he goes to the next stage of life, where he specializes in the performance of sacrifices. Next, he goes to the Aranyaka portion, where he specializes in the forest treatises. And in the final stage, he takes up sannyasa and he specializes in the study of the Upanishads. So this is, with this view only, the Vedas have been arranged in this manner. So in one sense, the word Vedanta means the evolution of Vedic wisdom in a man. That wisdom is evolving in him. When he was a brahmachari, that wisdom was in a certain manner, that evolved. And finally, it takes up the final form of the Upanishadic wisdom, of which the guardian or the keeper is the sannyasi. Now, there is another point here. Though normally the Samhitas is followed by the Brahmanas or the Aranyakas, I told that the Upanishads does not always follow this order. Sometimes the Upanishads appear right after the Samhita portion also. And the injunction for a sannyasin also is like that actually. The rule for a sannyasi is Yad ahareva virajet, tad ahareva prabrajet. The moment you feel distaste for this world, you are free to give it up. Thakur's story is that one farmer is there and his wife is criticizing him, telling that, you see, that person we know, he is slowly giving up this thing, that thing, all things he has given up. You cannot give up anything. Then he, with the towel on his shoulder, he was going to take bath. Then he tells, nobody gives up like that. You see, I can give up. You see, I am going up. I am given up this world. I will not come back again. He leaves the world and becomes a sannyasi. So this shows this injunction, this yad ahareva virajet, tad ahareva prabrajet. So it means, in one sense, it means that evolution, Vedanta means the evolution of Vedic wisdom. But it also means the most essential wisdom. But when we say that it is the most essential part of the Vedas, we should not think of the other parts as unessential, because they also have a place in the scheme of things. It is just like, for instance, physics. Now, classical physics, it evolves and later it has become quantum physics. And quantum physics, one may be able to study quantum physics also independently of classical physics. But still, to appreciate the final stage, you have to have a general idea of the early stages of physical sciences. So, that is how it is. In the case of Vedanta also it is like that. That when we say it is the essential portion of the Vedas, that does not mean that the other stages are unwanted or unessential. The early stages were also required. It had their relevance in earlier days, but now, of course, these things are not very much observed. So they have very much lost their relevance. And that is also one reason why now sannyasa has developed as an independent institution, which was not the case in earlier days. In earlier days, the same person, the same Brahmana who teaches his disciples sacrifices the sacrificial mantras, he himself may be a sannyasin or may not be a sannyasin also. But nowadays it is different. It is now, since Buddha's time, sannyasa is evolved as a separate institution. Now again, another thing to be discussed is, there are two views. The Western view is that the Vedas, the first, that they give a timeline for the evolution of Vedas. For instance, they say that the Brahmanas and the Mandra portion evolved first, and then at a later stage, Upanishads came. There is some plausibility in what they are telling, but the traditional view is that there is even a mantra in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which says that like fire coming in contact with wet faggots, different kinds of smoke issue when it comes in contact with faggots, different kinds of smoke issue. Even so, out of the Supreme Being has come, simultaneously has come, the Rig, Yajus, Sama, Atharva Vedas, the Upanishads, the Itihasas, the Puranas, the Sutras, the Kalas, the arts, then and everything, the Bhashyas, the commentaries, etc., it has come out of the same, simultaneously it has come out. This is how the tradition says it is like that. And also we should remember that though some Upanishads have been added later on, more than the Upanishads that have been added, many have disappeared because there were many shagas, there was say some 1,000 branches or something of Yajushaga or something was there, it was being told, which is not available anymore. Next we come to the propagation of the Vedas by Vyasa. Vyasa taught these Vedas to 4 of his main disciples. He taught the Rig Veda to his disciple called Paila Muni, and to Vaishambhayana he taught Yajurveda, to Jainini he taught Samaveda. He gave him the custody of this particular propagation of this Vedas, he gave to these 4 rishis. And the Atharva Veda he gave to a rishi called Sumanta. Now it was Vaishambhayana's disciple who was the famous Yajnavalkya. So there are some little bit interesting stories are there. That is, it goes like this, that Vaishambhayana disciple was Yajnavalkya and some other disciples also was there. So it seems Vaishambhayana had some illness and the disciples decided among themselves that they will take up the illness of the Guru. They will all together take up the illness of the Guru. So Yajnavalkya told that, what? Why all the disciples are required? I alone am sufficient to take up the illness of the Guru, he told. I will take it up. So it seems Vaishambhayana did not like this. He told, you are very arrogant. So he told him, you give back the Vedas and get away from here. He told him. Yajnavalkya, then it is told, he vomited the Vedas and he went away from them. Then the disciples, the sorry state of Vedas, it is lying as vomit, they saw, and they came in the form of partridges, or what is called Tittiri Pakshis, and swallowed the Vedas. And the propagation of those Vedas are called Krishna Yajurveda. So again the Vedas, one more division has come. The Yajurveda has been divided into 2 parts, Krishna Yajurveda and now the Shukla Yajurveda. What happened to how did the Shukla Yajurveda come into being? Yajnavalkya went and again meditated for a long time on Hiranyagarbha. Then the Surya Bhagavan appeared before him and gave him what is called the Shukla Yajurveda, revealed the Shukla Yajurveda to him. What is called the Vajasneyi Samhita. Vaja is energy. So Vajasneyi Samhita, because it came from the sun, it is called the Vajasneyi Samveda. And so again, Vedas become divided into two branches: the Krishna Yajurveda, the Taittiriya, Aranyaka, and all comes in the Krishna Yajurveda, and the Shukla, the Vajasneyi Samhita, and the Shadapada Brahmana, etc. It comes in the Shukla Yajurveda. So now the Rig Veda contains the Aitareya and Kaushitagi Brahmanas. The Krishna Yajurveda, the Taittiriya and Maitrayani Brahmanas. The Shukla Yajurveda, the Shatapada Brahmana. The Samaveda, the Chandogya and Tandya Brahmanas. The Atharva Veda contains the Gopada Brahmana. So this is a short example of the different Brahmanas contained in the different Vedas. So now in a general manner we have discussed the Vedas. Now we will go to the term Upanishad. What is the Upanishad? Now the etymology of the word Upanishad. It is described by Shankara in the Kathopanishad. Sadev dhatoho visharana gati avasadhanartasya upanipurvasya kvit pratyayantasya rupam upanishaditi. So this is how the word Upanishad is formed. Sat is a dhatu, is a dhatu belonging to the sixth gana, which has got three meanings. Panini has given three meanings to it. The first is Visharana, destruction. Second is Gati, leading. The main meaning coming here is leading. Gamayati, it leads. And the third meaning is Avasadana, loosening, Shithilikarana. So how these meanings? Avasadana, Tasya, and it has got the prefixes Upa and Ni. And it has got the ending, the suffix, like quip it is a particle. So now the upa means, we will take up the dhatu first. Destruction. What is destroyed? Avidya is destroyed. We will get to the philosophical portion later, or we can discuss it here itself, that there is one infinite non-dual consciousness which is the reality of everything in this world, and it is called Brahman. Brahmati Brahmayati iti Brahma. That which grows and makes other things grow is Brahman. So, this Brahman, this ocean of consciousness, this abstract consciousness becomes covered, as it were. The awareness becomes covered, as it can never be covered. But from the standpoint of some illusion has come, a play of a certain illusory play has been initiated. And the feeling, and the first thing that happens is the awareness of I comes up in it. Aham. I exist. I know. This is the first effect of this ajnana. And then the whole thing starts. The whole thing after this comes, that desire comes, action starts, jivatva, individuality starts. All these things come into being. So this avidya or ignorance, this avidya, how to destroy this avidya and regains one's own immortal, regain the memory of one's immortal non-dual nature. That is the subject matter of the Upanishads. So, Visharana, Gati, Avasadanartha. Visharana means it destroys. With the help of this knowledge, ignorance can be destroyed. This is the first meaning. And the second meaning is leading. Gamayati Brahman. It leads the sadhaka to the knowledge of Brahman. So, the Gatyartha is fulfilled. The next is Avasadanartha. Once ignorance is destroyed, we cannot be bound anymore. Like they give the example of the string that has been burned. The burnt string, it retains the form of a string, but one cannot use it for binding. So once the truth is realized, all these appearances may come again, but they cannot bind you. Another example illustration is that of the mirage. One sees water in the desert. You go near that water, the reflection of sunlight in the sand, and you know for once for all, you conclusively know there is no water in the sand. The next time you see that mirage, you are not fooled again. You will never go in that direction. So likewise, once the truth is realized, but they call it badha. The Sanskrit word for it is badha. The word that is used in English is normally sublated. Once avidya is destroyed or sublated, it can never again, the creation of avidya, the effect of avidya, the appearance of that comes out of avidya, that can never bind you again. So it is called avasadana. That is, you have loosed they cannot, they don't have the power to bind you. It means loosening. Next we come to the arrangement of the Upanishads. Now, how are the Upanishads arranged? Some examples can be given. The Taittiriya Upanishad is arranged at the end of the Taittiriya Aranyaka. In fact, the last 3 chapters of the Taittiriya Aranyaka is Taittiriya Upanishad. The last 6 chapters of Shadapada Brahmana, which itself belongs to the Shukla Yajurveda, is the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The Aitareya Upanishad forms the last 5 chapters of the Aitareya Aranyaka, which belongs to the Rig Veda. Then the Kena Upanishad forms the 9th chapter of the Talavakara Brahmana of the Samaveda. And the Isha Upanishad, which we are going to take up, that forms the last portion of the... Last portion means it is coming at the end of the Samhita portion, the Isha Upanishad. Samhita portion of the Shukla Yajurveda, the 40th chapter of the Shukla Yajurveda. Now, Upanishads are, it is told 108 Upanishads are there. It is told in the Muktika Upanishad, and which belongs to the Yajurveda. Now, the Aitareya and Kaushitagi Upanishads belongs to the Rig Veda. Taittiriya, Shvetashvatara, Katha, Mahanarayana, Maitrayani, etc. belongs to the Krishna Yajurveda. Isha and Brihadaranyaka belongs to the Shukla Yajurveda. Chandogya and Kena Upanishad belongs to the Samaveda. The Prashna, Mundaka and Mandukya belongs to the Atharva Veda. Some historical data is that it is told that the first translation, propagation of the Upanishads into a foreign language, one of the earliest was done by one Mughal, son of a Mughal emperor, who was Shah Jahan, Dara Shikoh. He arranged the translation of 50 Upanishads into the Persian language in 1650 AD. And this Persian translation was again translated into Latin, and it was Schopenhauer came to read this, the great philosopher in the early 19th century, or in the middle, I don't know the date. Anyway, he, after reading this, he told that there is no study as beneficial as that of the Upanishads. It has been the solace of my life, and it will be the solace of my death. Next, we come to what is called the Prasthanatrayas. The Vedanta is what it is called three. It is grouped into the three things are involved in it. One is that Upanishads, Brahma Sutras, Smriti Prasthana is the Bhagavad Gita, that Shruti Prasthana is the Upanishads, and what is called Nyaya Prasthana is the Brahma Sutras. Now, Upanishads, as we say, has got no human authorship. That is why it is called Shruti Prasthana. And the principles, the conclusions of the Shrutis, there seems to be many contradictory ideas in it. The Brahma Sutras reconciles them and gives them a consistent, coordinated meaning is taken out of it. A consistent, coordinated sense is taken out of the Brahma Sutras. The contradictions are resolved and presented. And the Bhagavad Gita, the same conclusions of the Upanishads, Vyasa has arranged in the Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita is considered, there is a human authorship. That is why it is called, it is a part of the Mahabharata, which is considered an Idihasa. It's a historical text. So, it has been given the status of a Smriti Prasthana. And the truths of the Upanishads are arranged in a very, like a wonderful bouquet, and presented to humanity through the Bhagavad Gita. That the Partho Valsa Sudhir Bhokta Duddham Gita Amritam Mahada. Partho is the Partha, Arjuna is the calf who is drinking the Vasudeva, that the cow is the Upanishad, the milk and the Vedas, and the milk of the cow is the Upanishads. And through Arjuna is taking out that Shri Krishna is the milks the cow, the milker of the cow. And he is milking it for Partha, Arjuna. Arjuna is the nimitta for taking out that milk of the cow, the milk in the form of the Upanishadic wisdom. And what is milk is the nectar of the Gita. So this is the Prasthanatraya. One is the Shruti Prasthana, which is the Upanishads, and the Brahma Sutras, which is in a sutra form, aphoristic form, which were the conclusions of the Upanishads, are arranged in a logical manner. The contradictions are removed so that a logical mind can accept it. And then the Smriti Prasthana, which is the Bhagavad Gita, where the conclusions are arranged in a very easy manner, easy to grasp manner in the Bhagavad Gita. Now there are three different schools of Vedanta. One is And these schools are as old, they may be as old as the Vedas, but they have at present we know them through three schools, that through the initiative of three different teachers. The Advaita Vedanta is propagated by Shankaracharya. He is the most well-known teacher. He lived some place in the 6th century AD, some place even later, in the 7th or 8th century AD. So, Shankaracharya is the most popular. We identify the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta with him and his successors. Though there are his guru is the Govindapada, we hear about it, and his guru is the Gaudapada, who has composed the Mandukya Karika, etc. The next is Shankara. Now we come to what is called qualified non-dualism. It is also called qualified dualism, Vishishta Advaita. That teacher is Ramanujacharya. He lived somewhere in the 11th or 11th century. Now, Shankara's philosophy is that Brahma Satyam, to put it in a very brief manner, in a very succinct manner, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Napara. That is, that Brahman alone is the truth. Jagat is Mithya. It is only empirically real. It is absolutely unreal. And the individual soul is in reality the supreme soul, Brahman. Jivo Brahmaiva Napara. This is the Advaita philosophy, that there is only one reality. That reality is appearing as the Jiva, the Jagat, and the Prabhanja. Jiva and the Jagat, the one, and as Ishvara. That same reality is appearing as these three: Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara. But according to Ramanuja, that all these three together make one whole. That the Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara, it's like a whole big tree. And the tree becomes the branches, the root, the fruits, the leaves, everything together make up the tree. So Brahman, the reality, is made up of by all these things. The Jiva, the Jagat, God, everything together contributes to the reality of Brahman. Then the next is Dvaita philosophy, and the latest and the most famous Acharya of it, who came even later than Ramanuja, that was Madhvacharya. He lived somewhere in Karnataka, and according to him, Shri Krishna is the reality. Shri Krishna, or he is the reality, is totally dualistic. So this is a short statement on the three schools of Vedanta, which is Advaita, Vishishta Advaita, and Dvaita. Next is the Smritis. Now the Smritis are considered that it has got a human authorship. Humans have composed it. Their authority is derived from the Vedas. And what are they? They are like Idihasas, Puranas, Manu Samhita, etc. They all come under, they can all be classified in Smriti, in the Smriti group. Now, so now I will just the qualification of the student. That I will discuss in the next class. So I think this will be sufficient for today. Om Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapatme Tayoshratva Pranamami Muhurmu Pranamami Muhurmu.
बहुत शुद्ध एक्टर रिक्वेस्ट आम्ही ते 5 मिनिट आम्हाला लेट रेकॉर्डिंग म्हणून शुद्ध 1 सेकंड